Okay, so if you've seen the video and you've read all the comments that I wrote about it, I never had my own model railway, and well, I've worked at Jeff since I was 25. I worked on the SR7 Mill Group since I was 25, but I've always wanted my own little railway, and I built certain pieces of stock just because I like them. That's how the J71 and the ES1 came about, and I did run them occasionally, but they weren't correct for Southern Region 1958. So they were put aside a bit, and well, the long and short of it was a couple of years ago, Jim Reed offered his three micro layouts, which are on the Gage O Guild YouTube channel, offered them for sale. And Ian and I and my youngest daughter, we went up to Jim's house near Chesterfield, and I bought two of them, and I brought them home with the intention of, well, just using them as a railway. And I thought, well, why not make Maltby into something that suited the stock that I've got. I mean, it's tiny. I mean, I can pick it up and carry it myself. It's only 55 by 18 inches. I can pick it up. So why not convert it to suit the stock I had? So that was where I started. Then the yeah, sorry, I can't do anything about it, that Ian, sorry. Then what happened was that well, I thought about DCC. It had a DC controller but built into it, but that needed repair. Although I could have done it or replaced it, I thought, well, it's a good thing to try out DCC. So what I did, I bought a pie sprog. So this is the sprog. This is what does the DCC, and underneath there is a Raspberry Pi 4. And well, the next thing followed on from that was JMRI. So I used a touchscreen, and then how do you control the points? The points were manual, and all the frog switching was manual as well on that, using pins which were used to come in contact with the blades. So I had a DR4024 servo driver that I bought for an N-gauge layout. And well, I thought I'll use that. So I got some servos. I had some servos from Jeff's that were incorrect for doing signals, but they were perfect for doing points. So I basically changed the operation of the points, kept the wiring tube, but cut that under the baseboard and used the three servos. So as you can see from the video, it's all operates using a touch screen for the points, and how I set that up to operate the points will be the subject of an evening with in next year in the screen in the next year's series. So I will go through all of that, how I set up JMRI and configured it so that all the points will work. So I won't go into that in any great detail now, but yeah, it's great fun to operate. I run the locomotives from a small 8-inch tablet. I can run two locomotives on a screen at a time. And basically what I've done is I've just used it as a test bed. I've used it as a test bed to practice techniques that if I practiced them anywhere else and they went wrong, it might be a bit of an issue. It's my own layout. If I make a mistake, well, it's my mistake. And I've learned a lot from it. Doing the static grass, never done that before. Learning how to do all that, how to mask it off so it didn't go everywhere. Then I built the overheads, which is used the same method that I use for Jeff's, except at Jeff, because we need access to the sidings, I've not wired them, so they're blind. On this one, I used the wire that I bought is jewelry wire, to actually put them in place. So yeah, Northeastern Railway near Manners Station to justify the ES1 locomotive. And well, that's what it is. It's at the stage now where I'm seriously contemplating making it available for exhibition. Needs a lighting rig and something to aid the presentation, and I'll be working on that when I can over the next year or so. So it's great. I can put it in the back of the car. I don't need a huge amount of stock. The control bits for it go into a bag. And yeah, it's excellent fun to operate. And it's so nice, even though I didn't build it myself, to have something of my own. Nothing else to say. Is anyone want to ask a question or sort of take the conversation on from there?
You've got another 57 minutes to go.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. Yeah. Now you know how I felt doing the video.
You just mentioned there, and I know that you and I discussed this a while ago now. You basically went from DC, having never used DCC, to a whole touchscreen controlled system. And I know obviously you've got an IT background. Were there any steps during that transition from DC through the various, the Raspberry Pi with the Sprague to something to the next stage of the DR, was it 24, whatever it was, that you needed help and advice from others?
I was quite lucky in that, coming from an IT and an electronics background prior to being employed on the 12-inch to the foot railway, I didn't really need it. If you've never looked at the JMRI website, there is all sorts of information there on how to get it going. I've got, well, when I did the evening with earlier this year, I've actually got 4 DCC sets now. I've got the DigiKS DR5000, which, they've gone out of business, but it still works. I've got this, and I've got a Merg system and a Hornby system downstairs. So yeah, it took a little bit of time to settle on what I wanted. The DR5000 for the big railway, which you thankfully designed for me. If I can just bear with me a second. So
Don't knock the camera over.
Ian drew this up for me. This is my
Other way around.
this is the 10-plot plan for my major railway, which now has got a home. So all the techniques that I'm practicing on the smaller one will be put into practice on this one once the weather gets a bit better. But when it came to doing the DCC, putting it all together and getting it to actually do something wasn't the big problem. The big problem was configuring it so that it worked in the way that it should have done. It took me quite a while to get my head round the way that points operate using JMRI and the touchscreen, because you have to configure it in sort of like in the settings, how to get it to work. And that was the thing that took a long time. But plugging everything together didn't take a huge amount of time. And thankfully, the work with the software that you need to run on the Raspberry Pi is done for you. And there's quite an extensive list of instructions that tells you, right, you do this, you do that. And as long as you can follow those, um, and they are written relatively easily to understand. You don't need to be a software degree holder or anything like that. You just need to follow them. It tells you how to get this image onto an SD card, because that's what it runs on. It runs on that. It runs all on that SD card. It's a 32 gigabyte SD card. That step is relatively easy. Like I said, the hardest bit is actually once you get into Panel Pro and try and configure it so that when you click on the thing to make the points move, it actually if you've got a crossover, it makes them go in the direction that you want, so that it's correct. The detection is correct. That was the hardest thing, to be honest.
So for each of the point motors, have they all got different addresses?
All the point motors have got different addresses, and what you have to do is you have to, within Panel Pro, you pair them up, or because there's only 3 points on this layout, so 2 of them work together and 1 of them is separate.
Yeah.
You can configure it, but you just have to make sure that when that one is reversed, this one is normal, etc., that kind of thing, so that the route is correct. And it's all about knowing where to put the settings in the setup in Panel Pro, and that's part of the thing that I'll be going through when we do the evening with in May. How that's all done. There is a video available where I've shown you how to do it already, but I will. It's quite an old video, but I will update that and we'll talk about it in the evening because, well, Panel Pro is great. It's a relatively easy way of having a certain amount of layout automation without going into the huge expense that some of the other ones are. Julian's going to do a program about those if you're interested, but JMRI is free, and, well, like some of the people who've been on the other presentations, I like free.
I like free. I'm all for free. It's just when I've done crossovers on or linked points on my layout, I've set the 2 motors, 2 servos to the same address.
Yeah, no,
So they both respond to the same command.
Mine are all different. Mine. And what all you do is you can group them using Panel Pro so that it selects the 2. But on mine, the DR4024 that I used, it's a black box, which has a DCC link, and it drives 4 servos. And it starts off with a default address, and when you add, so the first one is 100, the point, and then the next port is 101, and then 102. And the 4th one, if I'd had it, was 103. If you had another one, it would start at 104 to 107.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's beginning to annoy me a little bit, this the autofocus. I'll see if I can
it's
do
coming
something.
in and out a bit, isn't it?
Just put it onto manual.
Well,
while you're doing that, why Melbourne Street Brewery?
Melbourne Street Brewery. Okay. So I'm sitting there and I'm going, well, it's got to be something around Manners in Newcastle. It's got to be somewhere around there, because the overheads ran from Trafalgar Yard to Manners. It was 3rd rail from the top near Manners down to Newcastle Quayside, and then it went over to overheads again. So I'm looking at the map, the old Ordnance Survey maps from the university, the NLS up in Scotland, National Library of Scotland. And what I've done is I've just basically looked around manors, old maps from the sort of 19th century and a little bit later, to find out what there is. Now, there were two maltings in Melbourne Street. And Melbourne Street is a road not too far from Manners Station, roughly in the right area, but it didn't have a rail connection. So I picked on Melbourne Street because there were maltings there, and I thought, well, you could run a line in there. But Scottish and Newcastle breweries are basically all over Newcastle, absolutely everywhere. Gateshead, up by Newcastle Football Stadium, Manners, everything. And they all originated with various brewing companies that were taken over, some of them as early as the 1700s. Melbourne Street, the maltings there date from the 1740s. And well, they're listed buildings and they converted them into flats. So they're really, really posh flats now. And that's why I picked Melbourne Street. It was the only place in that side of Newcastle that I could use that fitted what I had in terms of doing the overheads. So that's why I picked Melbourne Street.
Were you specifically thinking of a brewery location as well, or was it just something that happened because of the information you found on the maps from the NLS website?
No, I wasn't thinking of a brewery. It just happened that it was a coincidence, really. It is largely a coincidence. Jim Reed's original iteration of Maltby was actually a mineral water works. So there's a certain amount of pipe work on the layout already from what he had already built. So I just sort of took it that it's got to be liquid because of the pipe work. So what can we have next? So well, we'll have a brewery, and what I'm going to have to do if I'm going to show it. I mean, I've got this book which I've been reading through, and well, it's for double O, really, but it's very, very interesting book to read because it gives you all these tips about concealing things when you've got a very small layout. Because you've got a small layout which has got a very narrow field of view. On a big layout, it doesn't matter because you can't see everything from one viewpoint. You've got to move your head to see everything. It's easier to conceal things. On Melbourne Street, there are things that you can see which are very obvious. So the end that's got the big traverser, the 3-row traverser, you can see through it. You can see it on the video. It's virtually impossible to conceal. Boris appears in the corner of the video because you can see him through the hole in the back scene. So really, when I do it for a showing, I've got to work out. I've come up with an idea how I can do that, and that's basically extend the scenic part of the railway to the traverser, but have that move as the traverser does. So you've got a little bit, you don't have a void. That's what it says in the book. It says avoid voids, because it's the last thing you want to see is something that you shouldn't be seeing. You need to conceal it as best you can. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to extend the back scene and attach it to the traverser. Okay, it will move backwards and forwards, but it won't be like there's nothing there, if you see what I mean. It's like a view blocker.
Yeah.
Going back to DCC at the moment, on your description for the layout, you mentioned the current controller being 3 amps.
Yes.
As a maximum. Is there a controller available that will push more amps out 5 to 10?
What I've got downstairs, I've got a Merg booster, should I need it,
Mm.
which is separate. But I've also made, and I made it for the presentation again earlier in the year, I made a Merg DCT set and incorporated a 4.8 amp booster into that as well. So it's all in one box.
Is that box compatible with the JMRI system and the Raspberry Pi?
It's not compatible with Raspberry Pi. I could run it off this because I've got JMRI on my laptop as well.
Thanks.
It's got a USB interface. So I could, the Panel Pro bit of it is transferable between, it doesn't matter what it runs on. The Panel Pro bit is transferable, so I could take the configuration and put that on here
On a laptop
and run it, because that controller has got it's got a USB interface, so I could do that. Alternatively, the DR5000, that is controlled by a Raspberry Pi. Well, it will work with a laptop as well, but that has got a dedicated Raspberry Pi for it. So I could transfer the SD card from this and plug it into the Raspberry Pi for that. And that would give me the full functioning of the DR5000 if I wanted to do things like know where trains were, have an illuminated panel with the sections lit. I could do that with that. I mean, the PiSprog is great, don't get me wrong, but the functionality of it is what it is. It is just really a Raspberry Pi to a DCC interface, so it doesn't have any extra functionality, whereas the DR5000, all right, they've gone bust, but it has huge functionality. It works with virtually anything. You can connect anything to it. It's got LocoNet built in and everything like that, and it will still work. And would you believe they are bringing out upgrade modules for it, because the bloke who designed it has set up his own company on the continent. It's called not a Yamo RC, or not another model railway company or something like that.
Right.
But you can get upgrade modules for it. You can upgrade the Wi-Fi and everything else like that. And he's working on a new thing for it. Okay. So all right, watch this space, but it's worth looking out for because of the functionality, really.
So just going back to you were talking about your hidden sidings, or the fact that they're not so much hidden because you can actually see through them.
Yes,
there was at the Kettering show it was about 8 years ago now. A small layout. In fact, that was a brewery layout. I think it was called Woodlands Brewery. And he had a very ingenious feature on that, whereby the loco would push an empty wagon into a shed, and the shed had this sort of what do you call it, a sort of floppy hanging curtain type door. So as it went through, it was then hidden from view, and inside the shed was a sector plate. And the loco and wagon would then run along the back of the scenery, so it was invisible to the viewing public. The wagon would be loaded with beer barrels or whatever, and then when it reappeared out of the shed, not only was there a loaded wagon, and there was probably two loaded wagons, and the effect of that was quite interesting because, and mystifying, I should imagine, to some people, because there was no apparent means whereby the operator was loading these wagons or adding them to the to the loco.
But it's quite a common means of disguising things. I mean, this layout here, this book, has got all sorts of tricks in it, and there are, if I can find it, examples of like this one, for example. If it will focus, like you see this one, it's got a sector plate and it's got a traverser, and you can transfer things between the two ends of the layout so that it disappears one end and it reappears at the other end. And what you do in between, you could change it. I mean, in effect, because I've removed the controller from this layout, like I said, when the layouts came, Jim had built a controller actually into the back of the layout. It sort of bulges out the back, and there was a controller there. Because I've got rid of it, I could do that. I could run a length of track round the back, the whole length of the layout. I mean, Ian's given me loads of track, and I could run a bit round the back so that you could do that. You could transfer wagons from one end and they'd appear on the small traverser at the other end of the layout. So yeah, I mean, I could easily do that.
Another question, interesting question, Peter. Well, I think it's interesting. Oh, I'm watching your, even as we speak, I'm watching your layout on video, and there's a Wickham trolley just appeared from somewhere. The electric loco, you mentioned what class it is. I've forgotten. What is it?
It's an ES1.
An ES1, right?
Yeah.
That, what's just occurred to me is I wonder if anybody has ever successfully, in O-Gauge, had an electric loco that's actually powered from the overhead.
That
possible.
Well, that particular locomotive, if you know anything about the mode of operation of those locomotives, they date from 1903, and basically they had to be double manned. There was no safety devices on them whatsoever. So the operation of, right, there's the one is at Shildon. And there are pictures on the internet of the workings inside. Basically, it was 620 or 630 volts that was carried from either the shoes or the pantograph to the resistances to make it work, and it was done by knife switches inside. So what you
but no, I mean, my question was in model form.
Yeah, in model form.
Has it ever been done?
I'm sure it has been done. Have you ever seen the video of Marseille that was in the virtual show a couple of years ago?
That was our first show, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was our first show. There was a video of a layout in France built around this house. Absolutely stupendous layout, unbelievable detail. But the locomotives on that pick up from the pantographs. They operate from pantographs. Yeah. So it is feasible to do it.
Be a bit complicated with DCC, I guess.
It'd be very complicated with DCC. Yeah. Yeah, it is feasible to do it. But yeah, you'd have to be quite dedicated to want to do that. But their ones do pick up off the overheads. But yeah, like I said, the real one, you have two knife switches, and the pantograph is operated by a handle through the ceiling.
Ooh.
It like pulls it down, and they had to do it so quickly because otherwise they'd lose the pantograph on the tunnel mouth at quayside depot. They had like the third rail finished or started just before the tunnel, and the overheads was suspended from the tunnel portal, and they had to do the changeover within the space of like 10 yards, and it took 2 people to do it. That's why they had to be double manned.
I trust the drivers were issued with rubber gloves with all those knife switches and
Probably not in those days.
manually operated pantographs.
Yeah, manually
And
operated
handles.
pantographs, yeah.
In the rain.
In the rain, yeah. The locomotive there's one thing missing off the locomotive, which you, unless you really know, you wouldn't spot. On the real ones, there was an insulator about that big in the operating rod that pulls the pantograph down. And that's missing off mine because I lost it when I made it. It was so tiny, I lost it. So I thought no one would notice, but hey, I'm being honest with you. So yeah.
Everyone's going to look for it now.
Yeah. Well, goodness knows where it'll be now.
You've obviously gone from DC to DCC with the layout.
Yeah.
You've added the pantographs and the overhead catenary and the posts. What other changes or improvements have you made to the layout since it's been in your ownership?
Well, what I've done is at the end of the layout where the small traverser is, so it looks like it disappears into the factory. There is a siding there which goes into the building, and the door opens. It's made out of cardboard, would you believe? The door opens, but originally there was no detail inside there. So what I've done there is I've added some surface. There's a little platform in there, so I've added surface to that using plasticard, and the bit at the back, the wall, I've added some brick plasticard to that. The wagon body, that didn't exist. There was just sleepers there for something to go. I added that. That was made out of all odds and ends I had from some Slater's meat van kits. I changed the watering column. That was originally one made out of just a tube of wood with a bent bit of wire coming out the top. So I bought a proper NER watering column. That I made the lamp. The lamp came from the demonstration of me making the lamp, so I installed that. I've also installed Dingham uncoupling electromagnets, but I haven't had the chance to get them into working order yet. Well, they're there, and I could use them. When I say I haven't had the chance, I haven't had a chance to convert enough stock to make it worthwhile to use, because you have to convert, you have to put all the bits on the wagons to make the Dinghams work. So yeah, those are largely the improvements that I've made to it. Yeah, I've added, the other thing that I've added underneath is all the point frogs are operated by frog juicers now. Whereas before it was sort of like a largely mechanical sort of type thing. So what Jim had done to do the conduct, to change the frogs, he had actually driven pins into the track bed, and when the blades moved, the blades came in contact with the pin, and the pin transferred the power to the frog. So there was no switching how you would know it. That's how he'd done it. So I replaced those with frog juicers, and they work perfectly. They're fine.
That goes back to a man in a cab putting a cable and knife connectors, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But hey,
Peter, I have to
we're
go.
here,
Sorry, it's fascinating. I like your little layout. I think it's brilliant.
thank
But
you.
I'm getting the hook from the upstairs. Anyway, thanks a lot, guys.
Take care, Peter. It's good to
Yeah,
see you.
you too. All the best.
All the best. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
So yeah, those are really the only improvements that I've made to it. Of course, it's all been rewired as well,
Yeah.
and I've added an asynchronous DCC thingy, a homemade one, to the large fiddle yard, because, well, you get your locomotive up to speed and then it's, oh, I've got to brake it now before it hits the end wall. So to sort of mitigate that a little bit, I've got an asynchronous DCC chip on all the 3 roads in the large fiddle yard. So if I don't slow it down myself, I get a certain amount of assistance from the decoders, because and that was part of the reason that the Sentinel has got a lock sound in it rather than a DR. Sorry,
Zemo.
Zemo. Yeah, because, well, it said that the Zemos originally, what I saw said that the Zemos won't work with asynchronous DCC, but they do.
Right.
So,
Any
but
plans? Sorry. Any
sorry,
plans
no.
Any plans going forward for any other improvements or modifications or new features?
Well, new features, like I said, all I'm going to do with regards to features is I'm just going to amend it slightly so that I don't get this void. When you look at it, you can see through it.
Yeah.
Basically, that's what I'm going to do. It's to make it more acceptable for showing, should I be asked anywhere. I've got a lighting rig for it. I just need to put it together. So that is what it's going to be like. I'm quite happy with the way that it's turned out. I know what works, what doesn't work. I've managed to improve my techniques with things that I wasn't familiar with, without causing damage which might not have gone down elsewhere, if you see what I mean. On top of that, if you remember what I said, I bought 2 of Jim Reed's layouts.
Yeah.
The other one is on the landing, not being touched for 4 years. So Philip has got his eyes on that. That may get a similar sort of treatment.
I was just going to lead into that actually as well, because going with you to pick up the layouts. I was going to ask what are the plans for the other one, but you've just alluded to that might be something for Philip or something for yourself.
Yeah, well, it might be something for Philip or something for myself. It depends largely on how this thing progresses. Like, I've got all the baseboards for this. I've got a cleared shed for it now. I've got plans. I've got a certain amount of stuff for that already. All right, I'm you know, with the job and everything else, the scope of my job has changed, so I don't get as much free time during the week as I used to have. So it largely depends on what happens over the next 18 months or so, on how that will develop, how it will change, whether I'll just go to Philip, oh, well, you look after that and I'll do my own, or I go for the smaller one first.
Yeah.
But yeah.
The interesting aspect to Melbourne Street Brewery is the 2 points that are interlaced in opposite directions. Do you find, having operated the layout now and having ownership for a few years and changed it, that it's not a operational limitation? In fact, it makes you think a little bit harder in how you've got to shunt your vehicles, rather than it being something like a single slip?
Oh, it definitely makes you think. if you consider from the video, you've got that the loading dock, which is on the left-hand side of the layout. There is just enough room in there for the Sentinel and one wagon.
Yeah.
So you have to draw the wagon in there, and if you don't want that wagon sort of compressed into being half an inch thick against the end baseboard, you have to be very careful how you drive. It does make you think. Same with driving into the loading bay on the right. You have to think. I think it's a great layout to operate because it does just that. You have to think about what you're doing when you do it. That to get that in 55 inches worth of length is brilliant. It could be so mundane and boring, but the fact that you have to think about it and be careful when you're doing it, it is probably about its best feature.
Yeah.
Really.
I mean, if you had the opportunity, was there anything you would change about the track plan?
Is there anything that I would change about the track plan? I would probably, the thing that I would change if I could is that I would like to have made the railway up to, instead of being 55 inches, if I could have made it up to 60, which is only 5 feet, that would have given me a little bit of extra space on either end. So instead of moving 1 or 2 wagons around, I might have been able to move 3 or 4 wagons around. It would have just given me that little bit of extra space. The scenic area is fine as it is, I think. Just to have that little bit extra on either end would have increased the
Operational interest.
Operational interest and scope of it immensely. You know, I can do a Sentinel and 2 at the moment, but a Sentinel and 3 would be so much better. J71 and 2 would be great. An ES1 and 2 would be great. And that's what that little bit, 5 more inches spread over either end would have given me. So it's a little bit short for what I've got.
Could you do that though by just extending each fiddle yard by, say, 3 inches to give you an extra, you know? Yeah. Or is it a bit too much of rebuilding of what is the ends of the railway to achieve that?
I think it probably is a little bit too much of rebuilding the end, because the end where the big fiddle yard is set up so that when it's shown, you can put a sheet in there to sort of describe what's going on. Or if you're going to operate it, when I did the video, I operated it from the front and I put the touch screen there.
Yeah.
All I've got to do is run a USB lead and an HDMI lead under the baseboard to the Raspberry Pi at the back. That's, if you're going to operate it from the front, that would be a great place to put the touchscreen. Yeah, it could be done, but probably not practically at the moment. I'd rather, let's face it, Ian, how long have you known me? You've known me 30 odd years.
Well, no, 27 years.
Yeah, well, it's quite a few years. The one thing that I am absolutely rubbish at is woodwork.
Oh, I was going to say finishing a project.
Well, finishing a project, but yeah. Well,
sorry.
Finishing a project, so I get interested in other things and I put them aside, but I do finish them eventually.
Yeah, no, you're right. Woodwork is something that you've not really, it's not really been one of your fortes, certainly with the Garden Railway. No, electrics is definitely your forte.
Yeah, yeah.
Electronics.
And I know my own limitations.
Yeah.
You know? And going back to what I said at the start, I've never had a railway. The reason why I've never had a railway, because I can't build baseboards. I could do everything else, but I can't build a baseboard. The baseboards that I've got for the shed, they're over there propped up against the wardrobe. They're from Grange and Hodder.
Yeah.
I didn't make them. I put them together, but I didn't make them. I could never have done that.
Mm.
So yeah, that's why I've never had a railway, because I'm an absolute duffer when it comes to woodwork.
I suppose that's about a lot of people are in a familiar place with, aren't they, as well?
Yeah, well,
Because it's not something we do as a within our hobby on a regular basis. We build locomotive kits, or coach kits or wagon kits. We paint items. We do electronics. We file bits of resin, which Nigel is probably doing at the moment, or has he got a soldering iron in his hand again? And yeah, soldering iron again. But woodwork isn't something we do regularly within our hobby. So you're quite right. It's something that I think other people leave to others to do. Certainly when they're club members or group members, it's like, no, I'm not really very good at that. I'll let someone else do it.
I mean, I was lucky enough that there was woodwork at school, but
Yeah,
I never took to it at school. We had woodwork, metalwork, and other classes, of a practical nature, and I was fine with metalwork and other things, even pottery, doing it on a potter's wheel.
Yeah.
If you put me in front of potter's wheel, I could probably throw a pot now with a bit of, little bit of practice. Woodwork, absolutely no chance.
But woodwork's just the same as metalwork. It's just a different material.
Yeah, but maybe it's psychological.
No, says James. No.
But I just can't.
It could be one of those things that, like you say, you just don't take to.
No, I didn't take to it at all.
Yeah.
Peter,
Yes,
Nigel here.
Nigel.
Why did you buy the poppies kit?
Why did I buy the poppies kit? Well, yeah. Well, you've got to dip your toe in somewhere. I mean, I've not made that bad a job of it actually. It's up on the shelf.
What diagram is it?
It's a diagram 61. It's a
61.
break. So that's my woodwork effort for that. It's one of the things I put aside because I've moved on to other things. People have been shouting me about the 2MT and things like that. So I have to go off and do the 2MT, and it's all about getting a sufficient amount of time to actually get into something to do it. It's the same with all the things. I mean, you can see I've got kits up on my shelves which I've never finished. I've got Phillips. Bring this down and show you.
Coal tank.
I've got Phillips coal tank, which is almost finished. But I've got this to go with the coal tank, which is the push-pull carriage.
The sidelines one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To go with the coal tank. That is sort of like I've not done the interior for that. I mean, it runs beautifully, but I haven't done the interior for it. So I've got
On the interior front, I'll send you a present for your 61. All right.
Oh yeah, I've got that. That's been like that for over a year.
Is that the MOK?
That's the MOK. It's all about getting sufficient time to do everything.
It's all right. I've got the scale 7/8F upstairs that I started in 2018.
Yeah. Well, I know where you're coming from. I've been there.
We all know.
T-shirt.
We all know that starting a kit is far more interesting than finishing it.
Yeah.
Right. As soon as you've solved all the major problems, it's then just a slog.
Yeah.
And a lot of my friends can only do one thing at a time. So they will start a kit and they will work on it until they finished it. And then when they finished it and it goes off to the painter, and then they'll start the next one. It's like, what's wrong with these people? Why can't they have 6 things at a time? I mean, come on.
I wish I could do that. I get too easily distracted into new things.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, that's my problem. That's my problem. I've got to do. I mean, Ian, you know, I've got a pile of kits down here that I haven't even started on. Jeff,
You got signals to finish
I've got
building as properly as well.
Jeff bought me a standard 5 kit. I haven't even. All I've done is copy the instructions. He bought that for me
3 years ago.
Well, he bought that for me. It's got to be at least 8 years ago.
8.
Yeah, I haven't even looked at it. I've got.
That's nothing, mate.
I've
That's
got
nothing.
this, which Nigel will like.
As Ian will confirm, having seen it, I've got a 7¼ inch gauge Royal Scot that I've been working on for 38 years.
38.
Yeah.
Nice one, Dave.
I first saw it at Dave's premises when he was still metalsmith and trading, and what, 8 years later, 9 years later, it hasn't. Yeah, there's something happened to it, but I'm not sure what.
So
Taking the wheels off it.
Yeah.
I've got this for my. This is for the layout outside. This is based on the a starter at one of the North York Moors stations. This is a copy of it, and I started building this years ago and never finished it yet. So
Very pretty.
What underframe are you using for the poppies kit?
Sorry,
What?
I
What?
haven't got that far yet. I haven't got that far yet, I'm afraid. I was just.
This is what you need.
Yeah, the instruction was to sort of just make one up out of a bit of brass like Nigel's done and get some.
As the instruction said, and we discussed this earlier, simply.
Yeah.
Simply.
Yeah.
So your Poppy's Wood Tech coach then, is that specifically for the new layout, or have you bought that to augment Melbourne Street Brewery and
No, it's for the
too big, isn't it? I suppose
it's for the new layout. I'm working from a picture that I've got of. I've got a picture of Stanhope Station. If I can find it. Oh, here it is. Is it in that one or that one? No, it's in that one. Right, so Stanhope Station in the 1954. I'll find the picture. Here it is. It's here somewhere. It's immediately after the bit on. Oh, sorry.
while you're looking for the picture, then have you got any plans to add any more stock specific for Melbourne Street Brewery?
No, Melbourne Street Brewery is fully
Basically
stocked.
finished.
It is
Right.
It is finished. A Sentinel J71 and the running around with the Wickham trolley if I want to. Now, right. So this picture, can you see this picture? This is Frosterley on the Weir Valley line, and that vehicle there, the first vehicle in that train is that
Right. Yeah.
one. Now the other vehicles in the train are all sort of like standard Gresley or Thompson non-gangway coaches, and thanks to Ian Kirk, it's quite easy to knock those up from his kit. So going back to my pile of stuff that I've not built yet, so hopefully you won't hear a crash and a bang. So here's Gresley 4-compartment brake third which is entirely for that line. The locomotives that I built, like Nigel mentioned in his presentation, I built a J71, sorry, a G5 from a DJH kit and an A8. All the stock that I'm building, including the 2MT, are all for that outside.
Yeah.
They're all DCC fitted. Although I had to be creative with the A8 because the last one went in 1960 and there are no recordings of an A8. So it's actually fitted with a school's sound file because it's a 3-cylinder locomotive, same cylinder size, but the wheels are a little bit smaller. So I used the schools for it. The whistle's probably different as well, but no, who's going to know? Well,
they are now.
Obviously, you know now.
And of course, you haven't taken into account the sound from the loco as the steam exits the blast pipe orifice, which would probably be different on an A8 to a school as well. So that'd be sound different.
It will sound different, but it doesn't sound too bad. It could be.
How do you know there's no recordings?
Well, it's not. Well, I think it sounds okay. It sounds just as good as all these Bluetooth chips that people are raving about nowadays. So, And then the other thing I've got from the new railway is these, which. So I said I've got loads of stuff. I did have something else 3D printed, which I would have, because you designed them for me. The stop time.
Oh, the ground signals.
Yeah, I got those as well. But what I've got is these. Now that I couldn't put these on Melbourne Street Brewery because they're quite by far the biggest buffer stops that you have ever seen in your life. I mean, that's 5 inches long. That is.
Yeah.
But those are for the new layout. I made those up. They were quite fun to make.
Cool. Well, Peter, thank you very much for joining us for this 1-hour live session to discuss Melbourne Street Brewery, your modelling and future projects. I really appreciate it. There's been some interesting questions, I think mainly from Dave Smith on occasions. And I'd just like to thank everybody for joining us for this session. We hope you've enjoyed our virtual show for today. Don't forget, it does continue until the end of the month, and all the live sessions that have run today have been recorded. And as soon as Peter and I have the time, we will edit those together and host them on our Guild YouTube channel for your perusal if you haven't been able to see any. So once again, thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Ian, James, Dave, and everyone else for coming and taking part in these live sessions and viewing the show. Is very well appreciated by Ian and myself and the rest of the team, that our work doesn't go unnoticed and people take part. So thank you. Thank you, Nigel, for doing your demonstrations and joining.
It's my pleasure, and I've finished the model as well.
Hurrah!
Wonderful. Hurrah.